Here I'm going to be talking about the first corner of the exposure triangle, aperture. Aperture is basically how much light a lens can let in, and it's measured in f-stops. So this lens that we're filming with now is an f1.4. That's the aperture value, that's the widest the aperture can go. The reason why wide aperture lenses are so popular is because they let in a lot of light. The wider the aperture, the more light it can let in. Aperture values are a bit counterintuitive in that the lower the f-stop number, the more light the lens lets in. So at f1.4 or 1.8, a lens lets in a lot more light than at 2.8 or f4 or 5.6. This is why some of the most common lenses to find in a professional's bag are a 24-70 and 70-200 f2.8. Those lenses are very versatile and very fast because they have wide apertures. Also, a 50mm or 85mm f1.4 or 1.8 lens are very common for portraiture because of their fast aperture. Also, they have a very thin depth of field. And that's the other advantage of wide aperture lenses. Depth of field is the distance from the subject in focus to the sensor or film in a camera. To illustrate this, I can move my head closer to the camera or further away from the camera than the focal distance. The current focal distance is about 1.5 meters, I'd say, from the lens, or the back of the sensor actually, to about this tree here. And that's how I know to keep my face in focus. When you're isolating a subject with a long lens like a 50mm or an 85, or even a 70-200 in a portrait, in a lot of cases photographers will use that shallow depth of field to their advantage and blur out the background. As you can see here, the lights on this tree, at least the front of it, are in sharp focus. But the further you go out of the focal distance, like the trees with the trees behind me, you can see that you get what we call bokeh balls. Bokeh is the common term for out of focus areas of an image, especially with sharp points of light. Like with Christmas lights, you see this all the time in shots like this. A cool thing you can do with depth of field and bokeh is change the shape of the light entering the lens, and you can change the shape of the bokeh balls. And those are the basics of aperture.